Kitchen Table Research, Part 1, Episode 1, Sandy Rea.
Hey guys, today it is Kitchen Table Research, and Sully and
Jones
are coming to you live from our studio. This is not going to be our permanent setup, but this is the first episode, and then we'll move over into our studio. But we just want to introduce you to Kitchen Table Research Season 2. It is going to be airing in 10-minute segments on TikTok. So every day we will drop an episode. Once all the episodes have been dropped on TikTok, we're then going to take the entire edited video and put it over on YouTube. Then we are going to take the uncut footage of the unedited raw footage, and we will then post that to Spotify, Apple, Deezer, iHeartRadio, Audible, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Okay.
All right. Okay, guys, so today we're going to be getting into the story of Sandy Rea. And unfortunately, there's just not a lot of information out there about Sandy. But we took our sources from the podcast The Vanished, from a article called Smex, Drugs, and Suits, written by Mindy Wood for the Tulsa Today newspaper. And then I watched some YouTube clips of unsolved mysteries out of Oklahoma on YouTube. So today I'm going to be presenting the case to Jones, and she is going to ask me any questions that she has about Sandy Rea. And then our next episode, you're going to present to me a case, and I will ask you questions. Although we both kind of researched both cases.
Yes.
But we thought it might be easier for our listeners for one of us to present and one of us to ask questions, as if Jones today would be our audience. Okay, so unfortunately, in the case of Sandy Rea, as I stated, there is not a lot of articles or a lot of information out there on the internet about Sandy. And so one of the problems with this case is that Sandy Rea got into a car from the local bowling alley, and from that point forward, she was never found again. So in this case, we have no body, no crime scene, no evidence, and only bad eyewitness testimony and rumors that swirled around Oklahoma after the disappearance of Sandy Rea. Okay, so Sandy Rea was a 17-year-old senior at high school, and she was from Shawnee, Oklahoma. So she was born November 25th of 1966, so she would have been 57 today. However, at 17 years old, Sandy Pathressa Rea went missing on September 19th of 1984 from Shawnee, Oklahoma. She was last seen wearing a gray crop shirt with the initials HS on the front and a pair of cut-off jeans and flip-flops. She's a Caucasian female with light brown hair, brown eyes. She has an appendectomy scar on her abdomen. And Sandy was also a cigarette smoker. So those are just some of the facts that the Charlie Project has on her case. So when we go back and listen to Sandy Rea's mother, Carol, she has some things to say. Now, before we get into Sandy's mom, Carol, I just want to state that at the time, Sandy was not living with her mother. Sandy was having a hard time getting back and forth to school due to her mother working multiple jobs. So at this time, they thought it would be better for Sandy to live with a friend to finish off senior high school so she could get rides to school. Now, Carol kind of had her own set of issues, but by all accounts, we've heard that Carol was a great mother, and that, like we said, this was a temporary situation just to get Sandy to school and back so she could graduate high school in Shawnee, Oklahoma. But if we listen to what Carol has to say, and remember, this is the mother of a missing child, she's quoted as saying, "I'd heard a lot of stories over the years, but I try to stay on the normal side of the investigation and not get carried away." She goes on to say, "I knew Sandy was in trouble, but I didn't know how to take care of her. In fact, she didn't want me to take care of her. I would have never thought I'd be sitting here 30 years later not knowing what happened." Mm-hmm. And when Carol is talking about Sandy was in trouble, she's talking about Sandy was known to frequent a lot of parties. And we're going to really get into that. And some of these parties had older men and lawyers and policemen that were going to these quote-unquote suit parties. So we're going to get into this. And females were given smugs and in return offered sexual favors. Sorry guys, if you're listening to the raw audio, you know TikTok's community guidelines, so we have to blur some words. So they were known as these suit parties, and they were known around town for women, young women, to go to these suit parties. So what do you think about that as a mom who had a daughter that was a teenager that, you know, went out to parties and hung out as a senior with friends and had a car?
Yeah, that really just seems to me to be over an edge that I am comfortable with. I assume we've got some oral sex going on in these smug parties, so that to me is a red flag.
Yeah, big red flag. And a lot of the men that were going to these parties and buying the intoxicating substances were all police officers, judges, like I stated. So that you have this kind of authoritarian group of men that are hosting these parties for young women. So I would say, as a mother myself and as a former teenage girl, that is very scary. Okay. So, as we stated, Sandy Rea disappeared on September 19th in 1984 from the Windsor Bowling Alley in Shawnee, Oklahoma. Now, her cousin or one of her family members worked up at the bowling alley, so she had stopped by there to hang out before catching a ride. And we believe we know who gave Sandy a ride, but it's never been fully confirmed. So, she asks her cousin if he wants to go to this party with her, and he says, "No, I've got to shut down the bowling alley. I've still got a couple of hours left here at work." So Sandy said, "All right, well, my boyfriend," and we're going to get into the boyfriend because they had this kind of on and off again relationship. She said that her boyfriend was going to pick her up that night, and that is what her cousin assumed happened. So he said around 8:30 that night that Sandy had said bye, and he looked up about 30 minutes later and realized that Sandy was no longer in the bowling alley, so he assumed that her ride was there and had picked her up. However, Sandy walked out those bowling alley doors that night into the dark and fearful darkness to attend a party-fueled evening that Sandy would never come home from. So, as we talked about Sandy, yes, she did like to party, but who else was Sandy Rea? Sandy was also a bright, outgoing, social butterfly. So many people have called her a free spirit, but sometimes having a free and trusting spirit can lead to nefarious people taking advantage of young women just like Sandy. And right now, we're working on a case that really reminds me of this Sandy Rea case. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The one in Houston, the missing person in Houston.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of similarities between this and another case that we've worked. So that's where we're going to end on this segment. So tomorrow you will see episode 2 of Sandy Rea pop up. And then as I stated, once we have the full videos out on TikTok, they will then go over the audio and video will go to YouTube, and the raw uncut audio will hit all of your podcasting platforms. So we're signing off for today. We'll be back with part 2 tomorrow. Thanks.